Welcome, everybody, to Dead Talk Live. And tonight, our special guest is Adam Robitel. Adam, thank you so much for being on our show. Writer, director, editor, and just overall filmmaker. Thank you for being here. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's my pleasure, and I'm excited to be here and talk to you guys.
Absolutely. It is our pleasure to talk to you. Let's just go through, before we get started, your greatest hits, okay? In 2014, you wrote, directed The Taking of Deborah Logan. Excellent film. By the way, Jill Larson was a guest of ours. What a nice lady. She's so cool.
Amazing.
Next, in 2015, you wrote the Paranormal Activity Ghost Dimension, where we got to see sort of the ending for our friendly demon Toby and how he ended up. Then came Insidious the Last Key, also a conclusion to the Insidious franchise as of now. Then you went on to direct Escape Room 1 and 2, 2 being Tournament of Champions. And basically, your movies, and this is nothing to shy away from, your movies have grossed hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars. So, congratulations. That obviously is not an easy feat. Are you satisfied with all the success that you've had, that you have now earned your Hollywood cred, so to say, and you've gained the respect in the filmmaking industry to where you get approached a lot, people wanting you to direct or write and so on?
Yeah, look, I'm really grateful that the movies have had success. I think Insidious was such a huge franchise already, so I didn't have much to do with, a massive train that was already moving. But I was really excited that Escape Room did as well as it did, the first one at least. But I think I'm in a place now where I want to do things that are more personal. I think in some ways my first film is the film I'm still most proud of, The Taking of Deborah Logan. When you get up into the sort of commercial studio movies, they become less personal,
Yeah,
and they sort of cater to the four quadrant common denominator. So you can't, like, I'm really excited to do a rated R movie again, because it's like, how many times can you say frickin'
yeah,
in a movie?
exactly.
Uh,
Now, let's go to the beginning. The Taking of Deborah Logan. Like I said, you wrote it, you directed it. It was your baby. Uh, it was a great film, a found footage film. How did you get the inspiration for Deborah Logan?
I always try to go to the things that scare me personally. And I had an uncle who had Alzheimer's, and I just remember being a kid and hearing stories like he ended up falling out of a window. That's how he died. And so I remember just how vacant he looked in the nursing home. And so as a kid, I was definitely terrified of that. And when I was mounting my first film, I thought, oh, okay, I guess I'm gonna have to make a found footage movie. They're cheap. Well, what can I do, that hasn't been done? And I thought, like, what about a medically grounded documentary that then permutates into a horror film? And I had seen there was this amazing clip of a woman. I think it was like a Nightline or like 60 Minutes, and she had early onset Alzheimer's, and she was young. She was like 50 years old, and she was talking about losing her memory,
Yeah.
and she was writing notes on mirrors and stuff. And then it cut to the same woman a year later, and she's in an adult high chair. Her skin is the color of snow. She doesn't recognize her husband, her daughters. It was so clear to me that's a horror movie in it itself. And so, yeah, and then I started doing research and found that it's not just about the patient, it's about the caregiver. It's the person who loves, the victim, who is watching this person slowly disappear before their very eyes. So I
Absolutely.
was really, yeah. So that was it. Initially it was my uncle, and then it was a lot of the research that I did that just further solidified that this was something I wanted to explore.
Is that why in the film the documentary maker, the female lead, not the lead, but the female documentary maker, she was doing this as part of her project for school, but she also had experienced a family member, if I'm remembering correctly, who had suffered dementia, and that's what led her to do the documentary on dementia. Is that why you wrote that in there?
Yeah, I think you always want a protagonist who has some stakes in the game and some way into a movie where it's going to mean something for the protagonist. So certainly was on purpose. Yeah.
Now, how hard was it for you to find the Deborah Logan that you wanted us to see on the screen?
Look, we saw some amazing actors and actresses for Jill's role. I mean, we saw the creme de la creme of sophisticated older actresses, and Jill was the only person who came in and was able to give that sort of like really sweet, give you a cookie grandma thing,
Yeah.
but then lean forward and turn, you know what I mean, and like literally just own the possession in a way that was so scary. I remember distinctly like the producers in one of the in one of the auditions literally leaning back, like recoiling, as she performed in front of us. And she's really striking. She's a beautiful woman, but she also has this incredible face that under the right light can be, intimidating.
Yeah.
And interestingly, she was in Shutter Island. She was a very iconic moment in Shutter Island where she's that older woman who goes,
Mm-hmm.
and I just remember, wow, I remember that image had burned my retinas. So she just came in and crushed it. We brought her in again with Anne Ramsey, and they did like a chemistry read. And
It was a
in
no-brainer
20
from
years,
there.
it was a no-brainer. And what's interesting is she's never seen a horror movie.
Yeah, yeah, she told me that.
Yeah, she did all this soap work. But so I knew she was good at like lots of material on a daily basis. But she totally trusted me, and I had her do crazy things, and she kind of like let me embrace her and walk her through things that sometimes as an actor like you, it's like, why am I naked in this attic right now, like stabbing, answering machines with my, so I had to walk her through certain things. I think it took a lot of her getting into her body and being much more of like just a physical actor and just not thinking about the text so
Yeah.
much as opposed to just inhabiting it. So she was incredible. And Anne Ramsey, was just as good. I mean, she came in and she had this incredible character face. You felt like she had struggled with the bottle and felt like her mother had rejected her.
Mm-hmm.
And the two of them together, Jill is so sort of refined and sophisticated and probably is watching Martha Stewart, and you could feel like she probably was out drinking in her youth and having a crazy time. So it really was a good balance between the two of them.
Absolutely. If you look at your writing in the films, let's take Paranormal Activity, Ghost Dimension, and The Taking of Deborah Logan. Uh, the ending of your writing, you sort of go against the grain and evil wins. Like with Ghost Dimension, Toby the demon, the build-up was happening for many movies before he came into this world. Was that your idea, or did the studio want the movie to end that way?
Look, Ghost Dimension was a really weird situation where they had been shooting the movie for a year, and a team of writers had been working on it for a year, and no fault of their own, the studio chief was deeply involved in story, and so by the time my writing partner and I got there, it was a mess. And so we literally, that was like a couple of week job where we had to come in and sort of like do triage just to make the movie frankly make sense.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to take any credit, or it's like, it looks like I've killed a franchise or two, but Ghost Dimension was tough, and they had all these different competing ideas. There's a camera that can see ghosts. There's a little girl who might be like the key to the coven, and she's also astral projecting. It was very complicated. And so we just tried to, we were like, and the problem with supernatural movies, right, is only two ways you can end a supernatural movie. Usually it's like, either it's going to be an exorcism scene or some version of like trapping a demon, right? Like, yeah. It's like, so it wasn't an ideal situation. I think what they did a lot of cool stuff. I mean, it's like when you have a found footage movie that has ILM doing your visual effects, it's pretty crazy. But I think they had gone the movies got bigger, as opposed to kind of I think the big problem, if I'm speaking out of school right now, because it's like, it's been enough time away from it, but they kept trying to redo the same thing that the first movie did. The first film caught lightning in a bottle.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the studio naturally, I experienced this with Escape Room because I tried to do something different with Escape Room 2. And, but the studio, once a movie works, they want the same thing again and again and again. Like they don't want to deviate. And I think, with Paranormal, like I would have, personally, if I was steering that, I would have gone in and like the second movie would have been, police cameras and like some forensics, like a different way in using the same kind of gags. But like, by the third movie, when you're just walking around a house and things are,
and
cold spots.
I 100% agree with you. I was thinking about this before we started tonight, and I'm like, gee, the Paranormal movies, how are we going to phrase that? And you hit the nail on the head. I had the same thought. They made it too complicated. Now, I don't know if you saw the reboot of the franchise that came out last year. They sort of went back to basics. They went back to originality, keeping it simple. About on a farm, an Amish farm, I believe. Just goes and it worked. It was a good movie because they went back to the basics. It didn't try to overcomplicate it like they did towards the final couple of movies of Paranormal Activity. Now, you mentioned Escape Room. Huge success. I love both movies, actually. I mean, Tournament of Champions and the first one. I thought they were both great. You did a great job of combining horror with heart-stopping action sequences. How was that experience with the first one? And was it challenging for you as a director? Or did it sort of come and flow naturally?
Great question, and thank you for the kind words. Having been under James Wan and stuff with the Insidious movie and Lee Wanell, those guys are like the masters of those movies. And I felt like, just thinking out loud, like I was like, there's so many of these, you've got the Conjuring movies, you've got all these Annabelle movies. It's like, so they have that covered. So it's like, what can I do, that's different? And I read the script, the Escape Room script, and I didn't even know what escape rooms were at the time. So I did a bunch of research and found that they were really immersive and visual, like the rooms change and you discover a map that was behind you on the wall. And so I saw that it could be really cinematic. And then the producers said to me, they want to make a PG-13 movie that does not rely on gore. So I said, okay, this is a great challenge. Like, how can the rooms and the architecture and the experience of the movie be really experiential and leaning more towards action and tension, the Hitchcockian thing of the bomb under the table. Mm-hmm. So with all of that in mind, we developed the rooms and and I learned a lot. I mean, I had a great DP and a production designer, my DP, Mark Spicer, who's just a doll, who taught me a lot. And then Ed Thomas, who is just a genius. And so those guys, they propped me up, and I learned quite a bit about, how the sort of muscularity of filming in a bigger space and using the techno crane as sort of like the omniscient eye of Minos. And, okay, what if we drop a floor panel and suddenly the camera hinges and it does this crazy move? And so Escape Room was sort of like my proving ground for like how to use the camera in a way that was much more complicated. Mm-hmm. Each room was super challenging. It's a big budget movie idea, but with a very small budget. So it was super challenging. And, we had the library that literally crushes Ben. That was all practical, literally with breakaways and a hydraulic wall. The billiard room was a fishbowl set that was built 7 feet off the ground with like floor panels that we could pull away and reveal the green screen. Super challenging, like Deborah Ann Wall when she's climbing the ceiling. Yep. Where do you put the pick points and how do we make her safe, and how, where do we get the camera in if it's if it's 4 walls? Because that was the other thing with Escape Room that was unusual, is like usually when you're on a movie set you've got 3 walls and like the crew's over here, but I wanted to be able to just pan and be in that space. So it was like, how do you build a space that you can hide a crew? So yeah, it was amazing. I mean, and we did quite a bit. And the billiard room was probably the creme de. It's probably still my favorite sequence, but and then with Tournament of Champions, it got bigger. It's like, I want to open up the world, so like, let's crash a train. I remember pitching that to Sony, and that's how we're going to get into the game. Like Mino said, they have the ability to hijack a New York City subway train, and so yeah, look, I think I've learned a lot. There's a lot of visual effects and things and integration that now I feel like I could go, if I wanted to, and make a Marvel movie.
Absolutely.
The jigsaw in the brain.
For me, Tournament of Champions, that bank scene is the one that the bank floor, the bank room with the lasers. That's what really stands out in my mind. Are you a fan when it comes to directing of the long shot? Like you said, you wanted to pan left and right. Are you a big fan when it comes to your directing of the long shot and just keeping the shot going and prolonging it?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think the escape room movies are pretty edity and pretty jumpy and pretty cutty. Look, I love prosaic shots that develop, and characters, you doing interesting blocking that really reveals character. But each movie kind of predicates itself. The material sort of dictates the way the camera is going to behave, and all of that is coming from character psychology. But yeah, if I cannot cut, I'd rather not. I certainly, the escape room movies were tough because I'm sure some of my actors felt exhausted because there's just so much coverage. It's like Zoe walking into the water fountain. It's like, you're going to do that 4 different ways, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to do like a close 20 mil, like, slow motion right on her eyes. I'm going to do another one that's like crosshairs is on the water she's carrying. And so by the end of it, they're like, really, dude, another setup, but if I'm doing a drama, like, I'd love to just hold a master and just be in it and because at the end of the day, the performances are really the best.
Oh, yeah.
The best special effect you get.
How comfortable do you feel being a writer yourself, directing someone else's screenplay?
It's interesting you asked that, because I'm working on my TV show now and I'm writing it. It's much easier. It's much easier to be not cavalier, but like, when you haven't written something, it's much easier to cut stuff. It's much easier to move stuff around. But when you blood, sweat, and tears, I'm literally at the end of 6 months of writing every day, and I'm so fried. But and we have to get our page count down, and so but it's hard. And so I actually had another one of our writers in our writers room like do the edits and cut down the scripts, because it's like part of your soul, to get it out. And nobody, like they always say, like, nobody cares how hard it was to write. If it doesn't work or if it slows it down, you got to cut it. And so when I don't write something, it's much easier to just go, all right, let's kick this to the curb.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about Insidious, The Last Key. Again, closing out a franchise. Got to work with Lynn.
I'm a franchise killer.
No. That's the hardest thing. Eventually, all franchises have to come, well, at least most of them do, to an end, and it's how do you wrap it up. Now, we don't know if it's the end of Insidious. I mean, they could continue making some
It's
more.
not. It is definitely not. Look, I mean, I think if Lee wants to keep writing them, they're going to keep making them. I thought Patrick Wilson was going to direct one. I remember reading that somewhere.
That would be interesting. I mean,
yeah.
Patrick Wilson and what he's been with the Insidious movies and then the Conjuring movies. But going to Insidious, getting to work with Lin Shaye and, working on that film, was that a challenge for you? You mentioned it earlier in the interview. Was that story challenging for you?
It wasn't. Well, first of all, I've known Lynn for a long time, and we're friends. So it was super exciting. And James Wan was really kind to my first movie in the press. Like, he's one of the reasons it kind of got a little traction, because he really liked Deborah Logan. So it was super cool. And then I was on the short list for it, and I went to Blumhouse, and I remember I had like no money left in the bank, and I literally did like. I made all these storyboards and I did this beautiful concept art, because in Lee's original script, which was really cool. It was more like a drama, but it didn't have a demon. And I said, guys, you know, I hate to say it, but and he had a lot of motifs. He had like locks and keys and prison, like a huge penitentiary. And it was very dark, but he wanted to go more towards, to his credit, more of a drama. But I did the studio thing. I came in, I was like, I want a demon. This is an Insidious movie. And I had this image that my really talented concept artist friend Jacob Hare had done, called Key Face Demon, with this like broken mouth, you know, with like a shotgun wound to his mouth that looks like a keyhole. And I remember in the meeting, like Jason was like, okay, this is really cool. And so then by the time I got the job, I got the new draft, and Key Face, this demon, was now in the script. But look, it was super fun. Lee Wanell, it was just amazing to get to know him and, you know, sit in story sessions with him while he was trying to work on the script. And I learned a lot from him, and it was great. The irony is, like, you know, you go from like 20 days on my first movie, Insidious, I had 30. So suddenly I thought, like, wow, this is like the big leagues, right? And the thing that you don't realize when you haven't made a movie is, like, everything is way harder than you think. Like, if Lin Shaye's character is going to go touch a doorknob and fly back off screen, that's a little piece of the script, but it could take a half a day of shooting, right? Mm-hmm. You have to get the stunt people in and get the stunt Lin, and so I think that's been the process for me, is like learning how complicated stuff is. How can you simplify? We shot up in Mentryville, which was this really cool like ranch up in northern, just outside of LA, up near like Castaic and Magic Mountain, and it was super fun. It was super fun.
Talking about sequels, with Tournament of Champions, with Escape Room, and then on to Tournament of Champions. You directed the first one and you directed the second one. When you're talking about the Insidious movies, you're directing a sequel and you didn't have a part to play in the prior movies. What is the difference when you directed the original, going to direct a sequel, as opposed to coming in halfway or towards the end of a franchise and it being asked to direct that?
I mean, the main thing is, like, Insidious was sort of like being a TV director, right? Like, the look of the world and the look of the film, the aesthetic and the way the camera was moving, like all that was already done before I got there. So I in some ways I felt like it was just trying to honor what Lee and James had done. But I'll give you an anecdote. Like with Escape Room 2, I didn't want to do the same movie again, you know, and I had this whole there's two versions of the movie, and I wanted to do an origin story of the villain. Like, cause what's tough with the Escape Room movies is, like, Minos is this amorphous thing. It's like they're on
it's like
mission.
Conglomerate.
It's conglomerate, but that's not really satisfying ultimately. And what I wanted to do, if I had my druthers, was to do like an origin story. Like, you start with like a viewing party and you think like, oh, this is some asshole's going to watch a bunch of kids die. And then it gets, you know, they get thrown into the game and you realize that this young girl who's the puzzle maker's daughter is actually the puzzle maker. And so we tried a version of that with, you know, Taylor Russell's character as well. And it didn't work because it was like too much story. We opened with this prologue. We meet the puzzle maker, but his daughter's in this prison in this cell. And like that would have been a whole other movie in a way, and a very cool movie, I think. You know, if you think the puzzle maker is actually bad, but he's keeping his daughter is actually a maniac, and she's quite brilliant. And you know, but to answer your question, so I tried that. The studio honored it, and then we tested it once at the middle of the pandemic, and it didn't test well. And then I was like, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. And you know, so
to redo it.
Sequels are tough because you know, it's like, unless it's like Aliens, it's like, what sequel is better or on par with the first movie? And you get into this trap of you have to repeat what came before, and so they're really tricky.
You know,
they're really tricky.
I'm glad you mentioned Aliens because I feel the exact same way, where I liked Aliens sort of a little bit better than Alien. I'm glad to know I'm not the only one. With the characters that Taylor Russell and Logan Miller played in both Escape Room movies, Was it always known that you were going to bring them back? Or did you want to leave their characters behind and just build a whole new story for the second one?
Yeah, I mean, we definitely had spitballed a bunch of different ideas, and crazy ideas. Like at one point, we talked about like, what if Minos, sub contracts all these people are working on the escape rooms. And they don't know it. Like one guy's making the bolts, another guy's making the oil that goes into the fire machine, and then they come together and they realize, oh shit, we're making escape rooms, and so they get thrown. So we had a lot of crazy ideas, but we kept coming back to like, Taylor Russell, her character Ben. They were so beloved, and the audience really rooted for them. So it just made sense to tell their story, tell a Zoe revenge story. You get to see her come out of her shell. She's really changed since the first movie, and she wants to go back into the thick of it. So it just seemed like the right call to kind of do that. It's so hard to get an audience to like a character anyway.
Mm-hmm.
In a modern movie, you do these focus groups, and it's like, well, how did you feel about the second lead? And Taylor and Logan are just so inherently likable.
They are.
So
how difficult do you feel it is in today's world to come up with fresh ideas for the horror genre? In a world where it's been done,
yeah, it's really, really hard. I mean, there's everything's been done, like you said. I think we're really cynical. You can do anything with a camera now. You can even visual effects. So like I always say, like with the first movie I did, it's less about the image and more about the context. And I can have an old lady's jaw distend 10 minutes into a movie, and then the audience is bored by that, they've seen it already, versus if you start with a grounded medical documentary and then spin it, and by the end you're like, what movie am I watching? So yeah, it is hard. I mean, I'm really excited about the show that I'm doing, because it's taken me probably a decade to find some subject matter that really I realize what I grab. The thing that I do best, I hope the show is as good as I hope it will be, is taking real world horror and then turn it on its head as a metaphor. And we're doing the same thing now that we did with Alzheimer's disease, but with drug addiction.
Okay.
And it's personal to me. I've had family members. I've struggled with my own demons with that kind of stuff, and it's similar to Alzheimer's disease. More people are dying this year to opioid overdose than coronavirus.
Yep.
So it's the next great.
It's been going on. What I feel, it's been going on for a while now, that I think society has become sort of callous to it, desensitized. It made the news. It's been making the news, and then COVID hit, and that just dominated everything else. When it comes to independent films like Deborah Logan, and then you have your studio films like The Escape Rooms, from a filmmaker's perspective, and the personal aspect that you brought up earlier, just from a filmmaker's perspective, let's put budgets aside. Do you enjoy making independent films a lot more than big studio films, where a lot of times decisions have to pass through committee after committee?
Yeah, no, it's been tough. I mean, it's definitely tough, and there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, and and you're navigating a lot of opinions. I mean, I definitely had the best time making the first movie, and I think it was maybe because I was so naive, and but it was also something I had written. I'd been a little lazy. Writing is tough for me. I have to I have to really get myself into a place of deep anxiety to get it done. And so I think I've avoided that for the last couple of years. And I was taking the easy road, but now I'm back in it and really mining the depths. And the show that we're doing, I'm feeling like creatively, for the first time in a long time, really fulfilled, because it takes all the stuff that we love about Stephen King and The Walking Dead and Requiem for a Dream, but it puts it into the metaphor of addiction. It's been really exciting for me creatively. I feel more enervated now than I have in a long time. And the scares, you ask like what's fresh, and I think this is, if we do it right, is going to really hit a nerve for people in a very cool way.
So let's talk about this upcoming show. Let's see what you can just, of course, tell us what you can and not what you can, obviously. But you are the co-showrunner. Is that accurate?
Yes, sir.
It's from what you said, it's going to be a horror type story.
Yeah, I can't say much, and
I know,
I'm probably
yeah.
yeah, no, I'm jinxing myself a little bit, but it centers around addiction and a small town, and Darren Aronofsky's company Protozoa are producing it, and yeah, and it deals, I think I can say, just with parental themes,
Okay.
but there's, yeah, it's a drama, it's at its core a drama horror, but it has really amazing psychological scares, but it also is going to have a lot of wish fulfillment and a lot of really cool Amblin-esque kind of moments too. So,
Are you allowed to say which network it's going to premiere on or
uh,
any of that?
it'll be with Netflix.
Netflix. Okay.
Fingers crossed. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
That's awesome. So I know you mentioned that you've been busy for the last couple of months writing the scripts. You're also directing, at least if not all, some of the episodes in this series. So, you know, are you guys done with the filming? Or are you getting started with the filming? Uh,
We are at the point where we've written six. We're writing the seventh episode right now, and we're just at that point where we're going to hear whether or not it's going or not. It seems fortuitous, but you never know until you're on a plane, and even then, you hope the check clears. But it seems like it's going to happen. We'll
awesome.
see. I mean,
How
yeah.
different have you been finding TV work, directing and writing for a television show as opposed to feature film?
It's been amazing. One the biggest difference is, well, first of all, I have a group of incredibly talented writers who we got to meet with every day on Zoom and just talk story. And my writing partner Gavin Heffernan and I, we wrote a pilot, and then Netflix is like, "This is really really cool. Write a second episode." We wrote the second episode, and they're like, "This is really really cool. Let's do a writer's room." So it's been stages. But the biggest takeaway for us, I think, that it's really instructive moving forward is like we spent weeks with the writers room just talking emotional journeys first,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean, like where the character starts internally and where they end up, and before we talked plot, because usually when I started writing, it was like plot, what happens, what's that cool thing, and then the ghost does this or the car does this, and here I'm thinking much more about like, no, where is this, what is the spiritual need of this person, what is their biggest fear, what do they want, where are they going, how do they interact with each other. And so that's been really interesting, and it's going to change the way I approach features for sure.
And
Start with characters. And that's ultimately, I always say this in interviews, but horror only works, and this is something James used to always say too, and going back to Spielberg and Poltergeist, it's like, if you care about the characters, you're gonna be afraid, and
absolutely.
so you have to. And it, by the way, it's really hard now because in the studio system with kids on their phones, like the first act, like if you watch Poltergeist, that first act is like 45 minutes. It's
Mm-hmm.
like before like the shit hits the
Yeah.
fan. And now it's like you gotta, you're expected to just grab them right away with stuff, and it's like you don't have the time to lean in and care enough about the characters. And so I really lament that's the tricky thing with studio movies. you know
And if you look at some of the greatest television shows, you mentioned The Walking Dead and other ones. Let's take zombies. Let's say the plot's about zombies. That's just a backdrop, okay? You could make that show the apocalypse be a pandemic or whatever, but it's the characters, it's the stories, it's the journeys that each character has to walk that makes a show a hit or not. Okay, now people
right.
fell in love with horror shows like The Walking Dead because they fell in love with the characters, not because they fell in
Absolutely.
love with the zombies. And you said that was sort of a new aspect that you were going to bring into features. As a writer, how challenging is it, instead of worrying about plot, doing character building?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the hardest part, and how to make them, because there's always the thing that we always run into, and I'm sure on both sides, even on the TV side, it's like the likability,
Mm-hmm.
like how do you make a character likable? And I always say, like, it's more important to make them understandable. You don't have to necessarily like Walter White,
No.
you don't have to understand, you don't have to necessarily like uh, um, Brian Cox's character in Succession. He's kind of a monster, but you're fascinated by what he's doing. You know what I mean? You're fascinated by this family, and TV has become. It's there's so much more nuance in TV. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? You don't have 90 minutes to tell a story. It's like you can barely just get like the first kind of couple of ideas out, and then they're like, all right, let's sew it back up. But with TV, you can have characters that are like this, and then break them apart, and then bring them back together again, and and weird pairings that don't necessarily make sense in the real world, but that kind of work. Ozark was another one that just kind of blew my mind.
Oh yeah.
And great moments of just horror and tension. So, and it's always about a family unit too. I think that's what the movies that really work in the genre space. It's like, whether, and not necessarily a literal family, but like, you really like, that's the thing with like Deborah Logan. Like I wanted an older, like certain producers wanted like a beautiful, lipstick lesbian, and I wanted that verisimilitude. You want to feel like these characters are real people.
Yeah.
And I got so many people were like, thanks for just depicting a lesbian that wasn't just about her stripping or doing her thing. It's like a grounded kind of take. And
People want something they can relate to. That's the bottom line.
yeah, like the kid, what's his name, who leaves like in the middle of the movie. He's just like, you know what, peace out, I'm done with this crazy lady. Like,
Yeah.
people were like shocked, like that would happen. And when you're writing it, what's really hard is, like, we're writing a lot of cops right now and a lot of procedural stuff. And if I'm not a cop, like, the only thing I know is the shows that I've watched.
Exactly,
right.
yeah.
So it's like you start sounding like an episode of Chips. And so, like, how do you make it honest? And with writing,
yeah.
you have to go to your own shit and the stuff that you're afraid of, and like the relationships that are maybe uncomfortable in your life. You have to kind of go to that and then tap it and then bring it into the material.
Absolutely. Has this show been personal for you, like you said Deborah Logan was? Is that what this show has been to you? You were part of creating it, you're writing it, you're directing it. Does it have the same feel, but sort of like the TV version of Deborah Logan in your heart?
It does. Yeah. I mean, look, I lost my mom a couple of years ago. She was an addict, and, chain smoking, 2 strokes, still smoking, and I've just been around recovery a lot. And I've seen some of my friends who've just lost their lives because of drug addiction. And I relate to that feeling of like, you don't feel like you're enough. And whether it's drugs, alcohol, food, sex, like whatever the thing is you have, I think we all on some level now, particularly with like commercialism and consumer culture, we're programmed to feel like we're not enough. We need something, whether that's likes on an Instagram post or whatever. And so with our show, like, the idea of addiction is all consuming, right? And I can get addicted to anything. And so it's a great equalizer. If you go into an AA meeting, you meet stockbrokers and you meet crackheads, and they're all there for the same reason.
Absolutely.
And look, life is short. I'm 43 now, and I'm going through my own little existential dreads right now, as you caught me. And so horror, I think, in a way, allows us to look at that shit.
And it's very therapeutic as well.
It is very therapeutic.
The thing that surprised a lot of people all around the world, not just in entertainment, when COVID hit, horror movies popularity went up.
Really interesting.
Yeah, it really did.
Although I wonder, I don't feel like I want to watch a bunch of pandemic movies
No,
necessarily,
no, 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 no.
but yeah, it's a bomb. Look, and we're all like, it's going to be interesting once we all finally turn the corner. Like how much psychological damage we've like how every day on my phone it's like death, virus, death, and
Yeah.
it's got to be
It
it's
takes
got to
a
be
toll.
screwing with our mind.
Yeah,
Yeah, it takes a toll. It takes a
absolutely.
toll. So
Adam, I want to
uh,
thank you so much for giving us this time and sharing all the stuff that on all the successes that you've had in your career, and you're just getting started. And I'm looking forward to watching this television show when it comes out and seeing your future feature movies as well. You're a brilliant writer. You're a brilliant director. The success just proves that. So thank you so much. Do you have any final thoughts you want to share with the audience before we go?
I just keep watching. I'm so appreciative that you asked me and you kind of got me out of my comfort zone a little bit. And I love your shirt, by the way. It's much too vulgar display of power, though. But yeah, no, look, I'm just grateful to talk with you tonight. And
So are
yeah,
we.
keep supporting the genre. It's the greatest genre there is. I mean, we have so much love in the community, and you're doing a great job and a great service for all the fans. So thank you.
Thank you, Adam. I want to thank Adam Robitel. I want to thank all of our viewers. Everybody, on behalf of Adam and myself, stay safe and stay walking. Good night, everybody.